What if I told you that not every being you call human is truly one? Yes, something inside you may have felt it. That strange moment when you look into someone's eyes and feel nothing. No spark, no response, no real presence. It's like speaking to a living photograph. The body is there, but the soul is gone. For a long time, you tried to ignore this feeling. You masked it with logic, good manners, arguments. But deep down, an unease keeps whispering. Something is wrong. And that something, as Nikola Tesla said, is not just a subjective impression. It's a hidden reality, one that few dare to face. Blavatsky was no stranger to speculation. She was one of the most perceptive and spiritually profound minds of modern history, founder of the Theosophical Society and seeker of universal mysteries. In her writings, she spoke of beings whose human form is only an appearance, embodied shapes without a soul in the true sense of the word. She called them empty shells, creatures severed from the higher self. To her, a true human is one who walks the path of the soul, who seeks, suffers, grows, loves. The rest merely repeat patterns, imitate, survive. This revelation, if you let it in, may completely change your view of the world, because perhaps you lived with someone like that. Perhaps you loved someone like that, and perhaps even now you're still trying to understand why it never felt truly meaningful, what it really means to be without a soul. Nikola Tesla described the soul as a divine spark, a bridge between the eternal spirit and the material form. It's not just consciousness, it's not just thought, it's what allows a person to reach for the sublime, to feel deep compassion, to tremble at beauty, to shed tears for a truth beyond words. The soul, a bridge between worlds, a link to the infinite. Now imagine living without it. Not that these beings are necessarily evil. Many are charming, educated, intelligent, talented. But something essential is missing, subtle yet undeniable. They are like finely tuned instruments that never play their own melody. They react, but do not truly feel. They speak of love, but don't know what it means to love with the whole heart. They describe emotions, but only as one might describe the color of a wall, accurate yet detached. Have you ever wondered why some relationships, no matter how perfect they seemed at first, left you feeling drained? Have you felt like you gave everything and received only a pale reflection in return? Have you noticed how some people seem unable to grasp your depth, your pain, your silence? Perhaps the answer lies here. Perhaps you were in a relationship with someone who had no trace of a living soul. Nikola Tesla warned, the danger lies not in obvious evil, but in emptiness disguised as normalcy. Because these beings learn to imitate. They are masters of mimicry. They observe, absorb, copy. They know what to say, how to act, when to smile, but nothing comes from within. Everything is just an echo. And most disturbingly, they often don't even know what they are. No guilt, no conscience, only repetition. In a world that values appearance, productivity, and efficiency, these people thrive. They climb the career ladder. They become leaders. They build networks. They seduce with ease. After all, they carry no burden of existential doubt, painful empathy, or spiritual torment. They live lightly because they live shallowly, but they leave traces. Exhausted hearts, confused minds, connections that never become whole. And you, a sensitive soul, may spend years trying to awaken someone like that, believing that with enough love, they will finally feel. But it's not a matter of time. It's not about effort. It's about essence. Blavatsky never spoke of this with contempt. On the contrary, she approached it with philosophical precision and compassion. She understood that these soulless forms are part of a greater balance. They exist for reasons we do not always comprehend, but that does not mean you must sacrifice yourself to accommodate them. Your soul is rare. It senses the invisible. It recognizes truth amid chaos. It bleeds in the face of injustice. and trembles before the sacred. It is silent not out of weakness, but reverence. That is why you suffer most when trying to connect with those who have nothing inside. So the question is not about them, but about you. Are you willing to keep hurting yourself, trying to give a soul to one who was never born with it? Will you keep doubting your sensitivity, mistaking it for drama or exaggeration, when in reality it is only the awareness of emptiness, disguised as presence? Blavatsky calls us to see clearly, to distinguish vibration from appearance, to realize that not every embrace warms, not every gaze truly sees, not every word takes root. And this is no cause for fear. It is a call for clarity. You don't need to hate, to run away, or to prove anything to anyone. But you must learn to acknowledge. You must protect your energy. You must honor your soul, because the more you awaken, the more you feel. And the more you feel, the clearer it becomes that something is wrong with the world. Some emptiness hiding beneath routine, a coldness masked as logic, a soullessness turned ordinary. And at that moment something shifts. You stop seeking explanations and start trusting your perception. You stop justifying what has no justification. You understand that some connections will never happen, not because of you but by their very nature. And that understanding is the beginning of freedom. Deep down, perhaps you always knew this. Now, finally, you can accept it. And the question that arises before we move forward: if the world is full of soulless forms, how does that affect your path? What changes in your mission, your relationships, your choices? Because recognizing emptiness is only the first step. What truly matters is what comes next. Most people believe being human is automatic, a state guaranteed by biological birth. But Nikola Tesla proposed an idea that challenges this comfort. True humanity lies not in the body, but in the soul that inhabits it. And not every body possesses an awakened soul. This claim may seem absurd at first glance, but how many times have you felt that you faced someone who was absent not physically but in essence, deep down? You speak and they respond, but in the middle of the conversation you feel a void, a cold, lifeless space. Something just doesn't resonate. Perhaps it was in a relationship with someone to whom you shared your intimacy, dreams, pain, someone who seemed perfect, spoke the right words, showed interest, even affection. But over time you began to realize there was an invisible barrier. No matter how open you were, nothing real penetrated the other person. It was like throwing feelings into a bottomless pit, only to receive a pale reflection in return. No depth at all. Nikola Tesla offers us a troubling explanation. People exist only in form, not in spirit. They are not evil, nor artificially created in a scientific sense, but they are disconnected from the higher spiritual source. They are like bodies acting from a consciousness limited to the immediate, instinctive and superficial. They can imitate, but they cannot feel. They can seduce, but they cannot love. They can be kind, but they cannot be transformed by another's pain. They are among us, often occupying prominent roles. They can be fathers, mothers, teachers, leaders, partners. They perform their duties competently, sometimes brilliantly, but they lack what cannot be learned or copied, the silent warmth of the soul. Blavatsky invites us to see something beyond the simple difference between good and evil. It is the difference between what pulses and what merely moves, and this has profound consequences. Most sensitive people, perhaps even you, spend years trying to connect with those lacking the structure to receive that connection. It is painful to accept, but necessary. Not every connection is destined to be mutual. And it is not about insufficiency, but about the absence of depth in the other. The soul, when present, suffers, grows, learns. It bears itself before beauty. It is touched by pain, seeks meaning even in the shadows. The absence of soul manifests differently. Repetition without transformation, presence without listening, words without spirit. And this absence is not always obvious. Many of these beings have mastered the art of simulation. They say what you expect to hear. They know how to react. They can even feign surprise, tenderness, compassion. But over time, something feels off. You realize their emotions are too straightforward. No nuances, no doubts, no true silence. A true soul hesitates because it thinks. It changes its mind because it feels. It retreats because it doubts itself. It makes mistakes because it tries. Those who lack this follow patterns. They don't feel the need to dive deep because there is nothing there to find. Imagine having dinner with an old friend. You share with them an experience of deep transformation. You tell of a vivid dream, of pain that revealed you, of a moment of reunion with nature, and they respond with a banal comment, perhaps even polite but missing the point. As if your words hit glass. You leave feeling lonely, even when accompanied. Such experiences are not uncommon. Blavatsky said that recognizing this is not spiritual arrogance, but insight. Many truth seekers spend their life energy trying to decipher these encounters. They blame themselves. They think they explained poorly, expressed their thoughts unclearly, did not try hard enough to connect. But the truth is, some doors do not open because there is no space on the other side to receive them. This applies to family members, colleagues, and romantic partners. Perhaps you spent years trying to be seen by one who never had inner sight, trying to be felt by one who doesn't even feel themselves, trying to build closeness with one who only repeats inherited patterns. And in the end, you are left with guilt. You felt too demanding, too sensitive, too complicated. But you are not too much. You are deep, and depth finds no echo in emptiness. Nikola Tesla taught that the soul knows itself in another through vibration, not through speech. The spirit is revealed not by words, but by the silence that follows them. It is not the gesture itself that matters, but the intention that precedes it. And when you face a person with a soul, everything around warms. Even in silence, there is a field, a flow, a presence that sees you without looking. You have experienced this. You know the difference. Therefore, from now on, the call is not to try to awaken the sleeping, but to honor the awakened. And it begins with you because your soul feels, your soul is aware, your soul vibrates. And this sensitivity, which so many have tried to silence, is your greatest gift. Protects you from manipulation. It warns you when something is wrong. It shows you that behind a charming facade there may hide a completely empty essence. It teaches you to choose your companions, not by the beauty of words, but by the truth of silence. Many live in a theater where everyone wears masks, but some forget they are playing, while others never knew there was something beyond the play. Blavatsky called them soulless forms. They are bodies that move but do not develop. They are alive but lack consciousness. They exist but they are not truly there. At first, it may be painful to accept this, because you may realize that you are surrounded by these absent presences, that your closest relationships were, in fact, connections to emptiness, that the memories you cherish might have been one-sided. But do not despair, because by accepting absence, you free space for true presence. And that changes everything. The soul seeks other souls, and when it finds them, it recognizes. There is no need to explain, convince, or impress. There is a silent peace, an understanding that precedes language, a warmth that fills effortlessly. These connections exist. They are rare but real, and they are worth thousands of attempts with emptiness. So, if today you look back and feel you spent time, love, and hope on someone who could not connect with you, know this was not in vain. Your soul was learning to recognize what truly matters. You did not waste your time. You discovered your worth. And the more you respect yourself, the more you begin to attract what vibrates on the same purity. What has a soul, what feels, what moves, what pulses. Nikola Tesla said that the greatest sign of the soul is the ability for inner transformation. Not rote knowledge, but the readiness to change, to rethink, to feel guilt, regret, compassion, to ask for forgiveness and to forgive, to die and be reborn inwardly many times during one life. Now you know what distinguishes the living from the living is not the beating of the heart, but the inner radiance, a quiet music that echoes even in silence. And before moving on to the next part, consider this question. If the absence of soul can be detected even in the people we love most, who have you really allowed into your field? And what you call connection, is it truly a meeting of souls, or just emotional survival between empty presences? The answer does not come from the mind. It arises from the silence after the question. There are moments when the soul senses what the eyes cannot see. Something inside stills for a second. A strange feeling overtakes you. It is not fear nor judgment, but a silent awareness that something is amiss. The face is beautiful, gestures polite, speech flawless, but there is an emptiness no appearance can hide. Nikola Tesla spoke of this sensation as one of the first spiritual signs of absence. A subtle awareness that comes not from reason, but from a deeper level of perception. How many times have you tried to silence this inner warning? How many times have you justified discomfort with logic? You told yourself, it's just me. Maybe I'm too sensitive. But what if it's not just about you? What if it's the beginning of a truth few want to see? The first sign of those who live without a soul is their gaze. Not the gaze as an organ, but the gaze as a portal. Eyes may shine, they may be beautiful, they may even seduce, but something within them does not answer. You look and feel lonely. There is no exchange. It's like looking into a mirror without a reflection. Blavatsky said the eye reveals the astral state of consciousness, and where there is no soul, the eye is just glass. Have you ever experienced this? Looked into someone's eyes and felt a cold abyss where there once was life? What seemed like beauty turns into harsh silence. It feels as if no matter how you look, you will never truly be seen. And no matter how hard you try, you will never reach what hides behind that pupil. The second sign is subtler but just as telling. The inability to connect with living nature. The soul feels life in everything. In trees, animals, stones, the wind. Those with souls are touched by birdsong or the scent of wet earth. But those without a soul walk through nature as if it were a staged set. No reverence, no inner silence, no unity. Have you noticed how children and animals instinctively react to certain people? Dogs growling without reason, cats shying away, children avoiding being held, even when met with a smile. This is no coincidence, it is energetic perception. Nikola Tesla said that pure beings feel absence before it shows in words. Where the soul is absent, even instinct retreats. The third sign emerges when emotions do not follow their natural course. People with souls respond sincerely. They feel and express themselves sometimes fiercely, sometimes gently. But between feelings and actions there is always a connection. Those without souls learn to imitate emotions, but not to live them. They cry without pain, smile without joy, console without compassion. Everything seems right, but something feels slightly off. Have you noticed this? A compliment that fails to warm, hugs that do not touch, declarations of love that sound rehearsed. It is like watching a well-staged play, but with soulless actors. Blavatsky called it emotional echo, a reaction trying to seem alive, but not coming from the spirit. Only a reflection of form. But why does this affect us so deeply? Because people instinctively crave deep connection. When the connection is missing, our soul feels the absence of the sacred. And the more sensitive you are, the more acutely you will feel this discomfort, even if your mind tries to justify it. Do you remember times when everything seemed fine, yet you felt an inexplicable unease? Perhaps you ignored that feeling. But what if, by doing so, you were suppressing your most powerful radar? The fourth sign is even more telling, the absence of an inner journey. The soul seeks, questions, changes, endures existential crises, transforms. Those who have a soul sooner or later begin to ask, who am I? Why am I here? What is the meaning of all this? Those without a soul move through life like helpless passengers. No reflection, no creative struggle, no shadow to integrate, only routine, repetition, and survival. Have you ever tried to talk to someone about purpose, spirituality, or inner growth, only to be met with an empty gaze or a banal comment? It is like throwing a seed onto rocky ground. Nothing sprouts, nothing changes. Blavatsky said that the soul knows itself through its inner movement, and where there is no movement, there is no spirit. And here is the question you may be avoiding. How many people around you truly live with their soul? How many merely act? How many simply play roles they have learned over time? The fifth sign reveals itself in encounters with beauty and art. The soul is receptive to the sublime. It weeps with music. It trembles with a painting. It is moved by the dance of fire or a silent sunset. Those without a soul watch all this with the coldness of a catalog. They evaluate, express opinions, compare, but never surrender because they do not feel. Have you ever seen someone listen to a song that shatters you, and they react as if nothing is happening, or describe a majestic landscape with complete indifference? It hurts, because beauty is the language of the soul, and when it finds no response, the silence that returns is almost cruel. But is it possible to live a whole life like this, without losing yourself, without shuddering, without giving up? Sadly, yes. And perhaps this is the sixth most obvious sign. Perceiving time as a dead point. The soul perceives cycles. It sees the past as a lesson, the present as an altar, the future as a calling. Those without a soul live only in the present moment. Their only language is urgency. Their only value is gain. They do not ponder time. They feel no nostalgia. They do not question their origins, nor dream of the future as transcendence. They simply produce, consume, and repeat. Blavatsky spoke of this as a state of deep sleep, a life without awareness of eternity. And here lies the catch. If time for them is merely a sequence of tasks, how can we expect understanding of the soul's purpose? How can we expect respect for our inner processes if they are unaware of their own? The seventh sign appears in the energy field. Everything seems fine. You feel at peace. But after spending a few minutes with this person, something inside you begins to wither. Unexplainable fatigue, foggy mind, a slight heaviness in your body, a feeling as if something has been drained. And indeed it has. Those with a soul share energy, even in silence, even at a distance. This is the field of exchange, of expansion. Those without a soul do not generate subtle energy. They simply consume it, often unconsciously. Blavatsky warned about this. The soul senses when it is being drained, and we must trust that feeling. Have you ever left a gathering feeling strange, heavy, confused? Even when everything seemed normal, it's a sign. Do not ignore it. The spiritual body speaks before the mind understands. And the eighth sign, perhaps the most painful, the inability to form deep connections. Those without a soul know how to build functional, strategic, useful relationships, but they cannot reach true intimacy. They do not know how to give themselves fully. They do not know how to be sincere. They do not know how to love while remaining vulnerable. They may seem like perfect partners until love demands presence. Have you ever been in such a situation? A relationship that seemed ideal, but where you never truly felt needed, where no matter how much you gave, you always felt alone. Perhaps that was someone without a soul, and that changes everything. Blavatsky said that the soul reveals itself in true love, the kind that transforms, exposes wounds, and forces us to grow. But those without a soul, no matter how much they talk about love, do not allow it to touch them. They only pretend. Deep inside, you feel that something is wrong. Yet the speech is beautiful. The gestures are coordinated. Everything seems right. And yet the heart doesn't warm, the soul doesn't blossom, and intuition screams. Listening to this intuition is the beginning of your liberation. For each of these signs is not a sentence, but a warning from the soul. A spiritual defense system ignored for centuries. But now, more than ever, it must be respected. Nikola Tesla brought us this knowledge not to instill fear, but to bring clarity, to remind us that not every being living among us shares the same calling, and that our mission, as awakened souls, is to recognize, protect, and discern. And before we move on, one question remains. How long will you refuse to see what your soul already knows? Because the soul feels what the mind still tries to deny, and the spiritual body never lies. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to have it all? Beauty, intelligence, influence, yet leave behind only destruction? Have you met someone like that? Someone who seemed the embodiment of all worldly values, but for some reason left you emotionally empty after every meeting? Someone who never yelled, never openly hurt, but seemed to take something from you? And you couldn't explain what exactly. Nikola Tesla said that soulless beings aren't necessarily evil. They simply lack a spiritual compass. This allows them to live without self-awareness, which holds many of us back. They don't experience the same guilt. They don't live in that sacred silence that sometimes forces us to look inside ourselves. They are efficient, charismatic, but empty. Modern psychological studies show that about 1 to 4% of the population have personality traits consistent with antisocial behavior patterns. Remarkably, a significant portion of these people are free. They work in offices, on social networks, in churches, on stages, in relationships. And while science doesn't use the term soulless, it invites us to look at this phenomenon from a deeper spiritual perspective. What happens to a being that has stopped seeking meaning? One who feels no connection to anything except survival and self-perception. Imagine a man praised in childhood for his strategic coldness. He learned that control is safer than feelings. He never cried out of love. He never lost emotions over a simple gesture. But he learned to smile at the right moment, to offer support when appropriate. And over the years, he shaped his personality until he became nearly irresistible. He becomes a partner, a father, a leader, a friend. But everything he builds is based on structure, not essence. And when you are near him, you feel something inexplicable. A warmth that never warms, company that doesn't fill, presence that empties you. This story may seem exaggerated, but how many real stories do you know about people who spent years with such a person and left emotionally drained, doubting their ability to feel love exist? Blavatsky said that the true danger lies not in the absence of good, but in the absence of soul. Obvious evil can still be avoided, but emptiness disguised as light seeps through. Recent studies on empathy have shown that even simply living for a long time with an emotionally detached person can alter the nervous system of those who feel deeply. Victims begin to experience symptoms like insomnia, anxiety attacks, digestive disorders, and mild depression, all without understanding the cause. The body reacts to the absence of soul in another. The soul within suffers when it goes unrecognized. Have you ever faced this? Tried to justify such exhaustion as hypersensitivity? Thought you were overreacting? Too intrusive, too emotional, too complicated? What if the problem wasn't in you, but in the complete disconnection of the other person from you? The absence of soul does not shout. It cools, silences, and fades away. Living with it for long is like living in a house without windows. You breathe, but see no light. It functions, but does not thrive. Survives, but does not feel. Why is it so hard to recognize? Because these beings have mastered human language. They know what gestures build trust. They can tell touching stories. They can be vulnerable when it serves them. But everything is external, a mask, a strategy. Blavatsky wrote that the true soul carries ancestral memory. It holds an echo of the universe, and that echo, no matter how subtle, vibrates when it meets another like it. Those without soul, even when they speak profound things, leave a strange emptiness in the air. No echo, no energetic field, no trace of truth. Have you ever read a message, heard a speech, or seen a post that seemed perfect, but something in it didn't resonate with you? As if the words lacked life, as if everything was correct except the atmosphere. This is the 9th sign, the use of emotional or spiritual discourse as a tool of manipulation. The soulless may quote wise phrases, use words like love, healing, gratitude, but embody none of them in life. They speak of feelings but have no emotional history to back them up. Blavatsky warned of this trap. When discourse suppresses real energy, we face an illusion. We must be careful. Not every sensitive speech comes from a sensitive soul. Not every spiritual conversation comes from an awakened spirit. The soul recognizes not by words, but by the vibration that supports them. And perhaps the 10th sign, the most subtle and yet the most telling, is how these beings respond to pain. They know how to express solidarity. They know what to say, but they do not feel it. Another's pain is an external event, something to use as an argument but never as a mirror, never as a portal for empathy. And when the pain is their own, it does not change them, it merely rearranges them. Sadness does not deepen them, failure does not humble them. They reset like a machine after a power outage, returning to the game unharmed, but without shadow, without learning, without transformation. Have you ever met someone who, despite facing severe trials, seemed unchanged? Someone who suffered losses, betrayal, illness, yet kept the same habits, the same attitudes, the same coldness? That is soullessness. A true soul is like gold purified by fire. Those without soul simply melt, harden, and continue on their path. And now, perhaps the hardest question, were these people born this way, or did they become like this over time? Blavatsky suggested that soullessness has different origins. Some consciousnesses are created without connection to the higher self. They are biological forms with mental life but lacking spirit. Others are souls who, after repeated egocentric choices over many lives, lose connection to their essence. And still others endure such deep losses and extreme trauma that part of their soul fragments or is rejected, leaving a functional but disconnected body. Ancient traditions tell of people who stopped dreaming, not metaphorically but literally. They lost their connection to the dream world, a space where the soul regains its strength and receives guidance from the unseen. For Blavatsky, this was a serious sign. Where there are no dreams, there is no bridge between the planes. How often do you dream? Do your dreams contain colors, symbols, messages? Or are they simply echoes of everyday life, scattered fragments? Perhaps it is a way to test your spiritual strength. The soul speaks to you at night, if you are able to hear it. Now imagine living with someone who never dreams, who never experiences premonitions, never feels cold, never responds to anything invisible. They may be effective, charismatic, rational, but they are a body cut off from its essence, a radio disconnected from its source. And if you are close to such a person, what do? Blavatsky never preached rejection. She taught discernment, respect for differences without sacrificing your own wholeness. An awakened soul is not obliged to save that which does not wish to be saved, but it does carry a responsibility, not to lose itself in trying to fill what was born empty. Perhaps you've spent your whole life trying to warm those who never knew what warmth was, trying to teach love to those who only learned to use it, trying to build deep connections with those who live on the surface. But now you know your soul feels what it feels for a reason. You know there are signs. You know there are truths the mind cannot yet accept, but the body has long understood. And that changes everything, because from this moment on, you can begin to choose who will receive your light, who will share your energy, who will build with you the kind of bond that truly supports your soul and your existence. And before we go further, there is one last question to ask. Are you willing to stop debating your truth, just to continue living alongside someone who was never truly present in your life? Sometimes the most unsettling question is not whether these soulless beings exist, but where they come from. Where do these unmoving, unchanging, dreamless minds arise from? Nikola Tesla answered without hesitation. He knew that to understand this phenomenon, we must abandon the comfort of simple explanations and descend into the vast realm of hidden existence. And it is within that realm that we begin to understand what it means to possess a living form without a spiritual essence. The idea that human bodies can exist without souls is not new. Blavatsky turned to ancient traditions to explore this possibility. In her work, we find the notion of animated forms without higher principle, beings aware only of the lower planes, physical, mental, or emotional, but untouched by the divine spark. They live, they work, they speak, they think, but a soul is not awake within them, and so they do not evolve. Have you ever felt that someone near you is alive, but not truly present, as if they had no energetic signature, no real vibrational field, as if they were merely a hologram of presence, lacking any spiritual substance? That feeling is not random. It is a key pointing to the missing source. There are many paths by which a soul may disappear, or perhaps never have entered the form at all. Some consciousnesses, according to Blavatsky, are unfinished creations, psychic fragments that have taken form without passing through the necessary stages of spiritual evolution. These are bodies born from unresolved karmic streams, from interrupted experiences, from energy fields occupied by forms that never went through the traditional cycle of soul incarnation. In other words, they are beings of imbalance. They were not necessarily created with evil intent, but rather emerged from flaws in the evolutionary system. They exist because, at certain points in humanity's spiritual history, the number of souls ready for incarnation could not keep up with the biological demand. And in that void, something filled the space. The body was born, but the spirit never entered it. And if that sounds too fantastical to be real, consider how many people you have met who seem to exist only to repeat, and repeat. No existential crisis, no deep questioning, no transformation, just an automatic loop of behavior. Blavatsky called such beings empty cocoons, forms filled with mental and emotional patterns, but lacking the spark that drives true growth. According to esoteric tradition, there is another path to soul loss: deep trauma. There are experiences so painful, so brutal, that the connection between body and soul is torn apart. As a defense mechanism, the soul may partially or entirely withdraw while the body continues on. It functions. It appears normal, but it is no longer inhabited. It remains in a state of spiritual inertia. Have you ever lived with someone who, after a serious trauma, was never the same again? Not just in behavior, but in essence. As if a light had gone out, and all that remained was a skeleton? This happens more often than we think. And in many cases, it is a kind of living death where the soul leaves and the body stays. There is also a third type, those who, over many lifetimes, choose to turn away from the light. Beings who, life after life, make choices rooted in domination, selfishness, and the rejection of the sacred. They are not merely unconscious. They actively disconnect. And over time, their link to the higher self fades. The spark dims. What remains is fragmented consciousness, still acting, desiring, controlling, but no longer connected to higher planes. This is one of the hardest truths to accept, because it forces us to see that the soul itself is a choice, a construction, a constant effort to return to one's origin. It is not guaranteed, it is not eternal, and it can be lost. From this point on, we begin to understand that the world is not only made of different levels of consciousness, but of different levels of spiritual existence. Some live in search of meaning, others merely exist. Some carry the sacred fire, others walk in bodies that only repeat inherited patterns. And between these two extremes, there is you, the one who feels, the one who seeks, the one who knows there is something more. Blavatsky never spoke of this with contempt. On the contrary, she approached the subject with sobriety and compassion. To her, understanding the origin of the soulless was a way to protect oneself, and to grasp the subtle dynamics shaping human connections. She knew that not all bonds are possible, that not all presences are worth sustaining. Have you ever tried to connect with someone, only to feel that no matter how hard you try, something invisible blocks the connection? As if the bridge cannot be built, because there is no ground on the other side? That is one of the consequences of the soul's absence. There is no meeting point, and every effort to create one leads only to exhaustion, disappointment, and self-betrayal. The hardest part is that such beings can be charming. They may seem awakened. They may even engage in spiritual conversations. But it is all form without substance. They may memorize sacred texts, quote masters, use the language of light, but inside there is no echo. It is like shouting into a bottomless cave. The sound does not return because there is no space within. Some say Blavatsky taught that true spiritual trial lies not in words, but in vibrations. The soul feels before it understands. The energy field does not lie. So protection begins when we learn to trust our feelings, even if the mind has yet to explain them. Have you ever trusted someone who seemed perfect, yet something inside said no? Have you ever ignored that signal and later regretted it? That is the lesson. The spiritual body senses what the mind tries to rationalize, and that feeling is the soul's greatest defense. But there is something deeper. Some of these beings, even soulless ones, learn to use spiritual techniques for manipulation. They learn to mimic presence. They know how to conduct meditations. They use touching words, but there is no true intention behind it all. They are forms using light tools to create an illusory connection. This is dangerous because it traps sensitive people in toxic relationships with beings unready for transformation. It creates imbalance in relationships where one side surrenders, gives, and recovers, while the other merely observes, absorbs, and imitates. Perhaps you have experienced this. Perhaps you believed you were in a spiritual process with someone, but in reality, you were drained by a presence merely imitating spirituality. And maybe it took you a long time to realize this because the speech was beautiful, the gestures correct, and everything seemed in place except for the vibration. Such an experience leaves deep scars because the soul senses a touch of falsehood. This spiritual insult demands healing. Blavatsky reminds us the first step toward such healing is awareness. Stop denying, stop justifying, stop trying to save, and accept what is. Not every absence is temporary. Not every disconnection is just a phase. Some bodies are simply no longer inhabited, and it is not your task to revive what does not want to live. The soul has a mission, and that mission requires focus. Repeating cycles of emptiness only lead us astray. You must accept that not all are ready, that not all want to be ready, and that not all were created from the same source. When you understand this, something settles inside you, guilt dissolves, aimless hope turns into wisdom, and you begin to guard your light, make clearer choices, keep distance with compassion, and protect what is most sacred within yourself. And from this moment, the question is no longer why they are the way they are. The question is what you will do with what you have discovered. We have reached the final part of this journey, and perhaps now you feel what many feel at this moment, a different kind of silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of revelation. Because somehow, throughout this narrative, something inside you has been rearranging. And perhaps you see more clearly what your soul has known all along, that there are people who do not have what you have, who do not feel as you do, who do not live with the same inner calling. And this is no exaggeration, it is truth. But what to do with this truth? Nikola Tesla was never an author of superficial answers. He knew consciousness is meant not just for observation, but demands positioning. And if you have a soul, sensitivity, and perception, responsibility rests on you. To care for your energy, to care for your path, and to give no more of what is precious to those who only know how to consume and never give back. The first step in this practical application is awareness. And it requires courage, because realizing that someone close to you lives without a soul or connection to spirit is painful. It is like accepting that the bridge you try to build will never reach the other side. But it is also liberating because you stop insisting, stop sacrificing yourself, stop denying yourself in trying to reach the unreachable. The world will try to convince you that hypersensitivity is a weakness, that perceiving the invisible is an illusion, that being moved by the subtle is exaggeration. But you know the truth. You know that it is precisely because of your soul that you remain whole, Even when everything around you is falling apart, you have survived empty bonds. You have tried to love the impossible. You have felt through your own experience what it's like to surrender to someone who has no soul. And yet, you are still here, with a beating heart, a pulsing soul, and open eyes. And now that you know all this, what will you do? Will you continue to abandon yourself for fear of being alone? Will you keep trying to be accepted by those who will never truly understand you? Will you keep calling love something that only empties you out? Or will you begin to write a new story, one where your soul takes its rightful place? Do not wait for the world to recognize you. Begin with recognizing yourself. There is something rare in you, something that cannot be manufactured, something no course can teach, no book can give, no social media can mimic. You have a soul, and your soul is your greatest strength. From now on, walk with that truth as your shield and your compass. Say to yourself each day, I refuse to live half a life. I choose relationships that uplift me. I pursue what carries soul. And if you've made it to this point, then something within you is ready for this new cycle, a cycle of greater truth, greater stillness, and greater light. If this message touched you in any way, I invite you to take the next step. Subscribe to the channel to keep receiving content that resonates with your soul, like this video, if it echoed something in your heart. And if you feel called, share your experience, your question, or even your pain in the comments, even anonymously. What you write may help another soul feel less alone. Wisdom grows only when it's shared, and here you are among your own. Welcome to the path of those who still have a soul, and who now, more than ever, have chosen to honor it. Thank you for watching. See you soon.